All right, let's talk a bit about corporations, the big villain of all your 80s and 90s movie needs. Corporations and why we form them, or why people form them, or why you'd even bother. Because I'm going to tell you a little secret here and now. If you listening to this, watching Klax, whatever, make money, if you want, and that it means like maybe commission artwork or YouTube videos or whatever, you could in fact have a business. You just need to name yourself and you are a sole proprietorship. Congratulations. It means almost nothing, but you are one. And if you have multiple people involved, you are a partnership. Cool stuff. Before we continue, I guess I should clarify for one thing. Most of what I'm going to be talking about, all of what I'm going to be talking about applies to the United States of America. As far as I know, because I'm not super versed on international business, but it is pretty applicable to most first world countries and things like that. I believe it is Western, Eastern, that kind of deal. But at any rate, you do have to actually do a funny legal ritual to become a corporation. It's pretty interesting when you read all the steps. I used to have to know it for an exam, but it's stuff like you have to like sign the articles of incorporation. You have to draft the articles of incorporation. You have to sign a thing called the resignation of the incorporators and name a board of directors and things like that. It's a very silly thing, but there's two reasons you want to do it. Let's get the least interesting one out of the way first. The answer is to issue stock. So if you want to raise money, you have a company, it's doing pretty well. What you could do is you could say, well, with my assets that I own, like factories or even just computers or whatever, and cash inflows, revenues that I'm making and things like that, I could have I could say my company has equity of, I don't know, like, I'll just throw out a number, $1 million. That is to say, if someone wanted to buy me out, that's what I'd charge them. What I could do, of course, if I wanted to raise $100,000 is I could sell some of the equity in my company. I could take 10% of it and say, I'm going to issue stock certificates in terms and, have an initial public offering, meaning, hey, everybody, if you want to buy my stock, you can buy it at, I don't know, $10 a share, depending on how many shares I want to actually divide up the stock. The math works kind of like you think it does, meaning that if you have, let's say, you want to use 10% of your equity to issue stock with, that's $100,000. And if you wanted to make 100,000 shares of stock, you could just put it out on the market at $1 a share. Obviously, these are all just easy numbers. And of course, due to the stock market, some people could say, that sounds like a deal, I'll buy it at $1. Or, that's not too great, I'll wait till it goes down or up. Or maybe they buy it and they sell it for even higher because you undervalued your company. The whole point is the stock market takes effect and all that fun stuff happens. If you become that in America, I believe it's like a C-class or an S-class corporation that lets you issue stock and things like that. And there's all things like common stock and preferred stock and blah, blah, blah. But that's not so interesting because I don't think you're super likely to do that. However, there's another legal entity known as the LLC, or the Limited Liability Corporation, which you are more likely to operate under, or you should definitely consider if you're not. And the reason is, it's the second reason you incorporate, and typically the more important one. And I want to give you a hypothetical example. It's a little dark, I apologize, but it's a pretty good one that I was given in business school. But I'm going to modify it a bit for YouTube. Suppose you watching this make YouTube videos, and you include a graphic, or maybe you include some kind of footage with flashing lights. And maybe you do put a disclaimer up that says, if you're photosensitive, don't watch this. Or you exercise caution when you watch this. Some kind of indemnifying legalese. However, maybe someone who doesn't know English happens upon your YouTube video. They don't understand the warning. Or maybe it is someone who understands English and they just don't read it. Maybe you put it under the fold or somewhere where it wasn't super obvious, or they had annotations turned off or whatever. And the flashing lights cause them to have a seizure. They bang their head and die. Sorry. And sorry, it's so dark. And then their family sues you for a wrongful death suit. Wrongful death usually, I think, runs around $250,000, from what I understand. But I'm not a lawyer. At this point, a lot of people in the comments are going to pretend to be lawyers, and that helps my engagement, and that's totally fine. I will just say one disclaimer. is that law tends to be not as intuitive as you think. Lawmakers tend to draw from scenarios that or draw from like information and scenarios that most people don't have. So you can't typically logic and rationale out what should be legal or illegal, and laws tend to be pretty counterintuitive, I should say. So yes, there is a lot wrong with the scenario I gave you. You are not likely to be sued. In reality, more likely, if a lawyer were going to do that, they'd probably go after Google themselves. That is, they'd go after YouTube for hosting the video rather than just some random person. But, again, this is a hypothetical scenario. Suppose they do decide to go after you for whatever reason. Maybe they think they can't win. You're on the hook for $250,000 in this lawsuit. Should you lose the lawsuit, what does that mean? Does that mean there's like a lien on property that you own? Will you have to take out like a second mortgage on property that you own? Will you have to have like wages garnished? Will you have to file for bankruptcy? The problem is that when it comes to this aspect of things, the government has, or a government has like two sort of conflicting things going on. In the judiciary, if a company makes a product or service that causes damage to another company or an individual, damage or even death or whatever thing you think of, someone has to pay. Someone's liable. This kind of gets into what's called tort law, which is like civil suits and things like that. But the idea is you cause some kind of fiduciary damage. This is outside the realm of criminal law, by the way, and it has to be restituted in some way. There's a lot of interesting topics on this. I would recommend the movie I think it's Hot Coffee on Netflix. The part about arbitration is a little outdated, but still, it's a good watch. Typically, the case that the movie is titled after, which is Liebeck versus McDonald's, I think. I always forget the name. I'm kind of just doing this off the cuff, but Liebeck is really cool. It's that case where the woman spilt McDonald's coffee. Almost everyone gets some major aspect of that case wrong. My business law professor mentioned that. He did like a poll. He goes, everybody gets something wrong about this case. It's amazing. At any rate, this isn't to spur a thing about frivolous lawsuits or anything like that, because again, you know, if you want to make a product or service, you might be liable for damages caused by your product or service, even if the end consumer used your product incorrectly or something. Now, now, on the one hand, a government, a local government, a state government, a national government, whatever, you know, they want that judiciary step in there. They want that restitution to be available to its citizens, but they also want to spur the economy. They want you making products and services because that helps the economy flow. Jobs get created. People spend money. There's income tax to be had. There's all sorts of good fallout from that. So they want to encourage you to make products and services, but the whole judicial aspect of it, the tort law aspect of it, can discourage you because you might not want to make a product or service because for fear of getting sued. To solve that, they invented a legal entity known as the corporation. Think like to be corporeal. It's a legal entity that exists outside of yourself. And the idea is it's basically a lawsuit shield. When you do business, if you do it under a limited liability corporation, hence the term limited liability, or really under any corporate heading, if someone sues you, they can only go after the money that's in the corporation. That way, you personally aren't like financially ruined if a product or service you make ends up hurting someone unintentionally. Now, just like a personal type of thing, if someone sues you for a lot of money and your corporation can't pay it, then the corporation has to file for bankruptcy in full, the same way as a person would. I don't know how that affects credit. That part I'm not into. But the idea is, if you have any fear that your product or service that you make might cause you to get sued, you might want to consider forming an LLC. Nowadays, it's a little easy, but like I said, there's all little rituals and weird like things around it. So here's some fun legal facts about it. when you do all the things correctly, that is, you sign your paperwork and you have a business account hooked up, linked to your corporation and things like that, and you get a tax ID and blah blah blah, you are known as a corporation de jure. I love legal terminology. I I don't know my Latin very well though. So a corporation de jure, just what you think it is. It's a corporation. Hooray. There's another thing called a corporation de facto. I believe DE and then suppose you filed to be a corporation, but like you messed up one thing about it. If it's shown that you did that in good faith, I know. Like if you almost got it right, courts will still protect you as a corporation. Like the idea might be some people might try to, this is an actual legal term, they might try to do a thing called piercing the corporate veil, where like if you have more money in your personal accounts and things like that than the corporation being sued, the lawyer might actually try to make an argument that, oh, you didn't correctly file the corporation, etc., and you should be on the hook personally, your personal finances and stuff. Corporation de facto is like a little bit of a safeguard, and it's like, okay, you almost did it right. Like, we're not gonna hold you to the fire just because one document like was missing a signature. You would have to talk to an actual business lawyer to know what the line is or whatever, but it's like there's I guess a good enough point with doing that. My favorite one, and I think a good example of something I said earlier about law being counterintuitive, is called the corporation by estoppel. This is if you're dealing with someone and that other party treats you like a corporation and later sues you because they treated you like a corporation, you could be legally considered a corporation just for the purposes of that very suit. Totally weird. I don't really know the use case of it, but the example would be you're not a corporation, you never filed anything, but you have like a pretend company you started, and and the other company bought stock from you and owned quote-unquote equity in this, and then later tried to sue you. You could say, no, I'm protected as a corporation. You can totally Google this for more information. I have to admit, I am totally like, I don't see the point of that, but again, it's just like a funny sort of interesting thing. Lastly, I do want to cover, like I mentioned piercing the corporate veil, and you might wonder, well, what's even the point or whatever. The reason is because there is one legal loophole people try to exploit called an alter ego, where, let's say you started a corporation and you kept like $50 in the corporate account, thinking that if I get sued, I'm only ever on the hook for $500. Courts will see through things like that. They'll know you only started the corporation and purposefully underfunded it just for that loophole. So they'll say, no, this is an alter ego corporation. We'll allow you to pierce the corporate veil and seek restitution from that person personally. So this is very interesting stuff. If like I said, if you ever feel like you might possibly get sued, it is worth having an LLC. All that really happens out of it is you have a business account that you should keep some money in just in case you get sued and things like that. But, I mean, if you really are doing something like commissioning art via Etsy and Twitter and stuff, I wouldn't worry about things like that. It's really only when you start making, like, serious money or consider doing something full-time, etc. But that's the very, very basics of incorporation and things like that. Thanks for listening. Take it easy.